Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. I thought I'd do a video today on what I think is a pretty important subject for at least some of you. I don't expect many people to want to do this process, but there is a process called adjustment of status. And there are some of you that may be worried, you may be at home in your own countries or living abroad, and you may be worried that your embassy is not going to open before the end of the year. That's a legitimate concern. I understand why you're worried. And some of you may have the ability to come to America and adjust status and actually get your green card whilst living in America. Now, it's not for everybody. If you're already in the USA, then it's a very suitable process. It's a good process. But if you are coming to the USA, there are a number of gotchas and complications which you really need to know about before you make the decision to come here. It's not as simple as it sounds, right? And so I just wanted to explain some of those main concepts, some of the gotchas, some of the advantages, and at least you can make a decision as to whether you think it might be suitable for you or not. Okay, so I'm going to present some information here. Let me just show you this. Okay, so adjustment of status. Okay, so what is adjustment of status? We call it AOS, adjustment of status, right? It's adjusting status from a non-immigrant visa, where you're living in America on a non-immigrant visa, to an immigrant status, a green card status, right? And you can do that through a number of different non-immigrant statuses and a number of different ways. Normally, it would be family-based or employment-based, but it is possible to process a diversity visa case this way as well. Okay, it's only for the people in the USA or people that can come to the USA on a legitimate visa and be here while they process. Only about 5% of DV cases annually are processed this way. I don't know what that 9 is, but it's about 1,000 cases a year. So it's not a very common method. And actually, if you think about it, DV represents about 5% of the overall immigration numbers. There's about 1 million immigrants every year. 50,000 roughly are DV every year, and 1,000 of those are adjustment of status. So only 1,000 out of 1 million cases are adjustment of status with regard to DV. So it's quite rare, rare enough that most lawyers don't know anything about it, frankly. The lawyers will know about adjustment of status, but not adjustment of status for DV, which is it has some nuances to it. Okay, so and I'll cover those a little bit in this conversation here. Okay, so let me just explain the main differences between consular processing, which is where you're processing at an embassy abroad, and adjustment of status, right? So the fees of the two methods are different. When you're doing consular processing, you pay $330 on the day of the interview. And you also pay later on, once you've been approved, as you move to America, you pay another $220 as the green card fee, and you pay for the medical at whatever that costs in local currency. In adjustment of status, you still pay the $330, but you pay that before you actually file. You pay $1,225 US. To file this is per person, of course, to file for adjustment of status, and then you pay for the medical in the USA, which is probably going to be more expensive than your own home country. So comparatively speaking, it's more expensive to do adjustment of status. It's a slightly more complex and I would say more stressful process. It's stressful because you don't have a fixed date of where several weeks in advance you're going to have an interview on this day. You can't prepare towards that day, etc. The process has to move fairly quickly. It's outside the normal parameters of adjustment of status, so everyone thinks you're in that case. When when you complain that your case is not moving very fast because you've got a deadline, and nobody in normal cases thinks of having a deadline with an immigrant visa case. So they're used to cases taking 2 and 3 years. So when your case is taken 2 or 3 months, you're screaming and they don't understand why, right? The adjustment of status process, because you're in the USA, you have some rights. You have the right of appeal for a bad decision. Although bad decisions in adjustment of status cases are rare, they're typically more likely to be approved, I would say, on average, than cases abroad, particularly compared to some embassies. The field offices in America do tend to prioritize these cases. So if you were doing family-based or employment-based processing, as I mentioned before, a timeline of a couple of years would be nothing. And so when you look at the average adjustment of status timelines for the local field offices, you'll often see 9 months, 10 months as being a quoted average, right? In reality, DV cases tend to go through a faster process. You can't expedite them, but they are naturally sort of expedited because the field offices know that there is a deadline. So they do their best. They try and get the cases through by the deadline, assuming your case has been filed correctly and in proper time. Okay. You don't have to present police certificates or military records. There are a few differences in the process. You still need to show that that you meet the requirements from an education point of view. You still need to have made no, serious errors in your application process and so on. Told no lies, that sort of thing. That's all important. Compared to consular processing, obviously consular processing is a simpler process. You only fill in the DS-260. It's easy, right? Then you have an interview. That's simple. There are a lot more forms in the adjustment of status process, and they are more complex forms. There is no appeal in a consular processing case, and of course, some of the embassies are just closed. They're not taking those cases, whereas that's not an issue in America at the moment. All of the field offices are open. Okay, so there's some gotchas, right? It can't be an ESTA. You can't be in the USA on an ESTA. You have to have an actual visa. You have to have been admitted on an actual visa. So that could be a visa such as an H1 or an L1. It could be a J1, which is a student visa. It could be a B1, B2, which is a temporary visitor's visa. That last one is a little bit more challenging because of the timelines that you're typically admitted into the USA for, but it is possible to adjust from a B1, B2. When you enter the US, you're not supposed to, on a non-immigrant visa, apart from dual intent visas like the H1 and L1, you're not supposed to have a preconceived intention to adjust status. Okay, so if, for example, you're sitting in Cairo and you notice your embassy is closed and they're not saying a damn thing, and you have a B1, B2 visa that you already have, right? You might say, okay, I'll jump on a plane and enter. You must not say, as you're entering the USA, that you're planning to adjust status. You mustn't have paperwork with you that shows you're planning to adjust status. You must not have a preconceived intention to enter the USA on a B1, B2, which is a non-immigrant visa, with an intention to apply for an immigration adjustment of status, right? You shouldn't be doing that. And merely the suspicion that you have that intention is enough to cause problems, A, at the entry at the border, and B, during your adjustment of status interview, if you get that far, right? So you need to be careful about that. There used to be this rule, which was it's a Department of State rule. Department of State actually don't run adjustment of status, and so it's not directly applicable, but it's generally accepted that this is a reasonable sort of rule, and it was described as the 30, 60, 90 day rule. But typically now we talk about if you are entering the USA, it's best if you can wait at least 60 days before you file your adjustment of status. So you enter, wait 60 days, and then file. Now, if you have no time to file, then you can file faster than that, but you're increasing your risk, right? Because they might say, okay, you only waited 2 weeks before you filed. You obviously plan to file all the time, and you say, no, actually, no. I entered the USA. I had an intention to be here for holiday and that sort of thing, for just to see my family. But then I realized, why am I going to go back to Cairo? Because I'm not going to get an interview there. And I thought, hang on a minute, I'll look into adjustment of status. It's got to be that sort of change of heart, change of mind that takes you to adjustment of status. There has to be some belief in that. So you must be careful not to create a record that you are planning to adjust status. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to say you should be doing anything illegal. I'm just saying that at the moment, during these times, because of how badly some things are going in some places, it's a possibility you might want to consider, right? And if you do, try and play it as best you can. You must have respected the terms of your visa. You must have always been in status. You can't be out of status at any time. So, and you can't have broken any rules. So, for example, if you're here on a J1 visa, which is a student visa, and you're not authorized to work, but you've worked, that can get you disqualified from the DV lottery. And once you've been disqualified through adjustment of status process, you are also disqualified from trying the consular processing process. Okay, so you'll have screwed it up completely. So if you are in the USA and you've broken the rules in some way, you've been out of status, or you've done something you shouldn't have done, don't try and adjust status, right? Don't try and fix that problem. If you did come to the USA on a B1, B2, let me take the example of my Cairo buddy again, then you have to understand that you're going to be in the USA for some months, probably, without any income, right? Because you can't work. If you're here on a B1, B2 visa, you're not entitled to work here or earn an income. And if you wait that 60 days before you file, then you file. The process for I-485 can take 2 or 3 months quite easily. 4 months is not unheard of, and more, right? So it can take quite a long time, and during all of that time, you're not entitled to work. There is a form you can fill out, which is an EAD, which is you ask for permission to be able to work, and you can file that at the same time as you file your adjustment status case. However, they're so slow to approve the EADs, you're more likely to get your adjustment of status before you get the EAD, right? So, in reality, I don't think most people even bother filing the EAD request. It depends on your timeline, but you're unlikely to benefit from it. Therefore, you cannot work while you're here, and you have to be able to support yourself. So, if you've got friends and family here, that might be a possibility. But if you don't have friends and family, that's going to be more complicated. And as I say, you must not break the rules when you're here. The deadline is the same as consular processing, September 30th. That's the deadline. That's the cutoff. There is no extension after that point in time. There's some advantages of adjustment of status. You can use a thing called the early filing policy. So, for example, yesterday, cases between 21,000 and 50,000 in Africa became current. Those cases, that number range I just described, could all be filing their I-485 adjustment of status package today. Even though those numbers are not going to be current until April, from 21,000 to 50,000 in Africa, even though they're not able to file until then, even though they're not actually current until then, they can file now. That's called the early filing policy. There's a memo about it. I'll show you in a few moments where you would get that memo. So you would take advantage of that if you could, right? You have some rights because you're in the USA, and you can have legal representation. So you can have a lawyer act for you. The only thing I would say is, outside of the three big firms that we know and love, Jesse, the Impact Team, Curtis Morrison, outside of those firms, I wouldn't normally recommend you go to a lawyer, because there's so few adjustment of status cases each year, and so few of those are handled by lawyers, that most lawyers don't know diddly shit about this process, right? They don't. And they're more likely to give you bad information and bad advice than they are to give you good information. So it's your choice. You can use any lawyer you want if you want to use a lawyer, if you can afford that. But as I say, I would generally either not use a lawyer, or use one of the lawyers that you know at least understands the diversity visa program. And the three firms that we know enough to about the DV lottery process, and obviously they know about adjustment of status, that they know the rules, right? And that's important. The other advantage you've got is a person called Someone's Mum. She's a fantastic lady. She helps out on a forum. She's a moderator of a forum. It's a forum in which I moderate as well. But she has been helping people with adjustment of status cases for years. She's very knowledgeable. She's written a guide about the adjustment of status process, which she makes available online. I'll show you it in a few moments. And she's a hell of a weapon that you have in your back pocket. She can give you information. For the majority of adjustment of status cases, they don't need a lawyer, they just need someone's mum. If you've got something more complex about your case, which could include you're planning to come here in DV 2022 because your embassy is closed, and you want to avoid the whole complication about preconceived intent. So unless you've got some complication like that, then you can probably file the adjustment of status forms yourself. They're fairly complex, but most people with a reasonable eye for detail and filling in forms, you have a stack of forms about that thick. So you have to go through all the forms and you have to get them all right. But Someone's Mum will help you, with information about how to fill those in, and she'll answer questions. She's fabulous. She helped me back in 2014 do my diversity visa adjustment of status process. So, that she really is an advantage for you. Okay. There is a process also called follow to join. Actually, I should probably explain the adjustment of status process. You fill in a bunch of forms and you file those forms when you're able to do so, when your number has been announced as being current, right? You then go through mainly a waiting process. You fill in all the forms, you send off your fees. You've previously paid your $330 to Department of State, and you get a receipt from KCC saying you've paid that fee. You take the medical, you get all your forms together, the I-485 and any other forms that are required, and you send that whole packet off to the Department of State, and they take about a week to 2 weeks typically to receive that form or that package of forms and accept your case, and then they allocate it to a field office near wherever you live, right? And so if you had just come to the USA recently and you're staying with family, you would give that address, and your field office will be relatively close to wherever you live, right? When they allocate the case to the field office will order you to go for biometrics, and they'll schedule an interview for you eventually. They do some things in the background, including checking with KCC that you are that you've paid the fee and that you're qualified, and getting your any information about your case. And all of that process can take a couple of months at least, right? So eventually you'll be told by the local office, the field office, that you have an interview date. You attend your interview, and pretty much at that interview, or very shortly after, normally within a few days at most, but typically within a few hours or even minutes, your status is adjusted, and you get an email, you get a text message or whatever saying that your status is adjusted, and now you're a lawful permanent resident, and then your green card will follow on within a few weeks. And so the process is complex in terms of the forms, fairly easy in terms of the interviews and everything else. So it can be a good process. But as I say, you've got to know what you're doing, right? Okay, so I put in some information here about the follow to join process. If we go back to this example of the guy sitting in Cairo, I don't know why I'm suggesting Cairo, but anyway, if you're sitting in Cairo, you come over and you've got a family of, husband, wife, and 3 kids. The principal applicant has to be the one that adjusts status. All 5 of that family could come to America, and all 5 of them could adjust status at the same time. But all 5, therefore, will have to pay the $1,225, the $330, and the medical fees. And all 5 will be sitting there pretty much on vacation while they're waiting, right? And that could be quite disruptive to your family situation. So there's an alternative to that, which is where the principal winner, the main winner, the principal applicant, comes to the USA, adjusts status, and files a form called the I-824, which is a follow to join process. It's got a filing fee of $465 per person. And so you would be filing it for, in my example, let's say it's a wife and 3 kids, right? The husband would adjust status in the USA and then file the I-824 for the wife and the 3 kids to be interviewed back in the home country. That process is normally very quick. You make your own appointment with the embassy, you negotiate with the embassy. They know very well this process, and it's more or less a formality. There's no real complicated interview process, but you're applying for immigration benefit for them based on your new status. Okay, it must be done by September 30th. If you fail to do that, then you're stuck with going down the family sponsored route, which takes 2 to 3 years to bring your family across. So there's a real motivation for you to file the I-824 and then move things as quickly as possible with your embassy. So that's just a possibility that some of you may want to consider. It might be less disruptive for your family if one of you were to come, the principal winner were to come and get the adjustment of status in the USA. And once you've done that, then you've got a foothold. You can be pretty sure that either through the follow to join process or family sponsored, you could eventually bring your family here, right? And so this might be a sort of a desperation type move. It might be the only way you can do things. And so, that's why I wanted to put the follow to join process in there. Okay. Okay. So I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover here. I don't want to go into the process in great detail. As I mentioned earlier, there is this wonderful lady called Someone's Mum. That's not her real name, that's her screen name, of course. And I just want to show you this, and I'll put this link in the chat, not in the chat, in the information below the YouTube video. Okay. So here's the user that I'm talking about, Someone's Mum, right? And she has produced this AOS spreadsheet, which I've opened up here, and it has a bunch of information. For example, it's got the pros and cons of AOS, adjustment of status, versus consular processing, a more detailed version of what I just talked to you about. She has a description of the adjustment of status process. She has a list of all the forms that you need to be filling out, which package, which forms should you be putting in there, with all sorts of helpful information and links to examples of the cover letter or the various memos that you need to be aware of, like the early filing policy, all of that. Okay. There's a ton of really good information here about the adjustment of status process. As I mentioned, she is a genius. She's a brilliant woman. She's wonderful. Someone's Mum. I highly appreciate what she does for adjustment of status cases, because it is very specialized, and it's not something even I know about in enough detail to advise people on. even though I went through the process myself, right? So what I'm telling you is, if I'm not an expert and I'm saying lawyers don't know as much as someone's mum is the the expert, in my opinion, on DV related adjustment of status. So you're very lucky, frankly, to have access to her, as long as she doesn't retire from this anytime soon. Okay, so like I mentioned, I'll give you the link to all this information. And the only thing I ask is that what really frustrates me is when I give people the link to this particular forum, I always tell them to come into the first post of this post. Every year she opens a new post, which is year specific, and then people ask questions, right? She doesn't mind you asking questions. I don't mind you asking questions, but I do ask, and she asks, that you read the information on the adjustment of status spreadsheet first. Please don't ask her questions that are already answered in the process. If you can't be bothered to read the spreadsheet, if you can't be bothered to do the forms properly and use a little bit of common sense, and follow the instructions, then don't do that process. Get a lawyer to do it for you. Because if you can't be bothered, then frankly, you shouldn't be bothering someone's mum to do the work for you, right? You should be paying someone to do the work for you, and that's when you engage a lawyer. Okay, so if on the other hand you want to get good information, you're happy to take some responsibility and do a little bit of learning yourself and fill the forms in yourself, then you can save yourself a few $1,000s by going through the process yourself, which is perfectly possible. I did it myself. It's easy enough to do it. Okay, you just have to follow the instructions, but please don't ask questions that are already answered. If you just read what she's already written, she spent a hell of a lot of time on that. Okay, I think that probably covers it. I hope this was useful for you. I don't think everybody is going to be able to go through this process, right? There are some risks inherent in the process. Coming to America with a plan to adjust status is a no-no. Coming to America and being able to survive financially while you wait for everything to happen, that's going to be expensive, or it's going to be challenging. It's going to be very stressful while you're waiting because you won't know what the hell's going on. And it's going to feel like you're about to fall off a building. And right at the last minute, it's probably going to come together and it's probably going to work. It's got a very high success rate, but it's going to feel bloody uncomfortable until that final point. I can promise you, I've been there. I went through this process. It's difficult. And I was just reading a post from 2014 that I made about my own process, where I went to the field office and asked them what the bloody hell was happening with my case. And the staff don't know diddly about the process, right? So, and I was told all sorts of bad information. And thankfully, obviously, I knew enough to educate the person telling me, who was a senior field officer, right? Had been doing the job 12 years or something, and still didn't know diddly about this process. And so, when you have to battle like that, when you don't have a fixed date in mind, when you feel like it's all going to go wrong, etc., and you're battling against the government, who frankly, feel at times like they don't care, or they don't understand, or they don't know, and they don't understand why you're in a panic, because all cases take years as far as they're concerned. It can be a scary thing, right? So it's very stressful. So please, make a note of that. That's my advice to you. This is a challenging way to go if you are planning to come here to do this, but it may be your only chance, right? That's the reality. This is an act of desperation in a sense. So please take that warning seriously. Okay. All right, everybody. Hope this was helpful, and thanks for listening on. And hopefully, if a few of you can go down this route, please let me know, and let me know what happens in your case. And fingers crossed for you. All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you. Bye bye.